Hello, my name is Matthew Smith, and this is my podcast. It is called Love, Forgiveness, and a Little Bit of Taint. Today's guest is Mikkl Hansen. I've known him from my traveling life while I was homeless. We often played music together in the streets and drank many a beer in his traveling war machine, also known as an old Dodge van. Today, he and I are going to have a conversation on the second episode here of Love, Forgiveness, and a Little Bit of Taint. Without further ado, I, Matthew Smith, your host, will be speaking with Mikkl Hansen. Started already. I think this is similar to how me and Pat's conversation went. We're just warming.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Do I need to hang up?
Earlier, you were like, "I'm going to need to get a bunch of stuff," and like, we're going to have to start over and formally start the conversation.
No, I was just saying we would at a point in conversation start the formal discussion that I want to get into. I wasn't going to hang up and restart. You can just edit out the beginning. I don't care.
Oh, yeah, who knows what I'm going to do with it. I haven't really decided yet the exact tone I want to take, but I'm working on it. So what's one of these ideas as you exhale your brain juice?
Okay, so I want to put some kind of a structure on this, and we'll see how well I can hold to the structure. I'm not promising anything, but this is kind of what I want to cover.
Yeah.
I want to start on the 7 deadly sins, specifically the concept that I had originally come up with deceit being the 8th one.
Yeah.
And I just want to talk about deceit first, because what I want to talk about is truth, the concept of it, because I've heard a new concept of it. And a lot of this has to do with archetypal mythological stories from the Bible, other religious texts.
Yeah.
An assertion that I've been hearing recently from Dr. Jordan Peterson and this is something that I'm very familiar with in my alchemy research. Is probably where I should start. As reading these ancient texts and trying to connect them to one another, it becomes really clear really quickly that there's a common theme amongst all of them. You start to notice the concepts that are carried among each one.
Yeah, there's a lot of archetypal themes at play. Not just characters, but ideas. There's
idea.
As a species,
and so
there's some core ideas that seem to guide us.
Exactly, and that's the idea that he's looking at it. That he's looking at these stories from a Darwinian perspective, and the general assertion is that, because everybody hears him making comparisons to things like God and heaven and hell. And those are usual trigger words for your common skeptic. Like they hear somebody say the word God, and they just immediately, make their assumptions.
Yeah.
But the point that he was making that I found really interesting, and I find it interesting because it takes something that I've known and puts it into a much more concrete form where it can be understood. And the idea is that these archetypes, these principles, these metaphors, if you will, but you can't use, and he actually shies away from using the term metaphor or allegory because it's not true. It really comes down to what your definition of true And that's something he said. It comes down to what your definition is of what's true. And that's what starts to grate me a little bit, because I'm like, no, the truth is objective. The truth is one. There's one truth.
Yeah. A real quick thing. Who's that guy with the long speeches about natural law? I can't remember his name right now.
Mark Passio.
Mark Passio. His to paraphrase him, his definition of the truth is pretty acceptable, because there's many definitions of concrete truth, objective concrete truth, and how that can play out. His is a good definition to reference, in the sense that the truth is what has happened. And there was an event, and it did happen a certain way. And that objective reality can be viewed in many, many ways. And that's all of our individual perceptual realities.
You're right, and that actually kind of, and see, this is what I was hoping would happen, because my concern when I hear things like a different kind of truth, what do you define as truth, is I start thinking about solipsism.
Right.
If we start questioning, if we concede to people the ability to define the truth, they're going to say, well, the truth is a social construct, and I can define whatever the truth is for myself. It's going to be complete chaos.
Well, the truth is we do already assign truth for ourselves. I mean, it's what we're all about. It's part of the individualistic nature.
So you don't usually take those truths you assign to yourself. Well, God, it's happening more and more often, but most of the time when you have a personal truth that can't stand up to scrutiny, you don't shout it in the public square.
A lot of times you don't, right.
And try to have laws passed regarding it.
Right.
And so this is the cool concept that I really like that he put forward, is that, okay, so let's look at evolution of humans, right? Let's look at the hero archetype. We're familiar with the hero's tale.
Right.
You know, the hero who slays the dragon. He ventures out into the unknown and confronts chaos, confronts that which could kill him.
Yeah.
To get the gold, or whatever, you choose your prize.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a reward.
Yeah, it's meaning.
And it's almost always a coming of age type tale as well, regardless of the age of the hero. There's some sort of coming into their own.
Well, there's a maturing element to it.
Yeah,
And looking at it, and so Dr. Peterson frames it as looking at it from a Darwinian perspective. Like, you can say that you don't believe in a story. Let's say there's a story in the Bible that teaches that principle. You can say you don't believe in that story, like, as factual, like you don't believe it factually happened.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean it's not true. It's meta true, or hyper real, or hyper true.
Yeah,
in the sense that
it's art. It's a poem.
So let's look back all the way back at, like, monkeys. There's snakes, there's serpents that come into the trees and prey on us, and eventually one of the monkeys found out you could drop a stick on one and kill it.
Uh-huh.
And that monkey was really popular with the other chimps. The monkeys that were willing to contend with chaos and take that risk were promoted to the top of the hierarchy. They were even the other male monkeys would be like, fuck yeah, that dude killed a fucking snake.
Right.
He's a badass.
Right.
And you might say, well, like, oh, monkey hierarchies are dominated by power, and yeah, some of them do. Like, any system can be corrupted by power. It doesn't have to be a part of it. Like, there's two sides to everything, and they've even shown that chimps that rule tyrannically, they don't have any social interactions, no friends, they don't do any reciprocal grooming. It doesn't take very long until two chimps, 3/4 of that main chimp size, tear him to pieces.
Right.
It's an unstable hierarchy. It's the wise leader that has a stable hierarchy. He tends to the women and the children. He has reciprocal grooming. He's social.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine that at one point in our history, we watched that individual. We watched and observed that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And we started imitating it because we saw the rewards that it reaped. And then eventually you have a set of individuals who are acting out this behavior. And this behavior has become the norm because it's necessary to survive. You have to kill the snakes.
I hate to say it, it's so cliche, but monkey see, monkey do.
Exactly. And if you're successful in the hierarchy, that's what you do. You pay attention. It's so important to pay attention.
Right.
Especially, assume who you're talking to knows something you don't. It's something I have to work on doing more often, be better at. And so you can imagine that as a set of monkeys start embodying this trait, it becomes the norm that, like, this is how you behave if you want this all to work.
Right.
And at a certain point in our evolution, we abstracted that concept from the individual. We separated the heroicness, if you will, from that individual, and that became the concept that we then told the story about. And like that is the archetype. That's like you can say you don't believe it, but you act it out.
Right.
You're acting it out every day.
Our majority of our society is sort of governed by a lot of these ideas.
And so, like the story of Cain and Abel, like I'll use this one as an example. And so quick recap of the story just to make this whole talking point complete. So, Adam and Eve, they give birth to the first two real humans because they're the first ones to ever be born.
Right.
Adam and Eve, they were created by God, but these are the first two to be born. And so, Cain is the first one born. He's older than Abel. And when they go to make their sacrifices, God looks upon Abel's sacrifices with favor, and he doesn't much care for Cain's sacrifices at all.
Right.
And everything's going great for Abel. He's a great guy. Everybody loves him. Everything he touches turns to gold. Meanwhile, here, poor old Cain, everything he touches turns to ash.
Yeah, and envy.
And he's got his perfect brother over here.
Yeah.
And instead of paying attention to Abel, he gets resentful, and he broods on it, and he broods on it. Eventually, he goes to God, and he says, "What the fuck kind of world did you make? Like, what the fuck is going on?"
Right.
And God tells him, and it's really fucked up, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but God tells him, like, essentially, sin is at your door like a predatory cat, and you invited it in. Like, not only did you fuck up, but it's your fault.
Yeah.
Like, you made a creative relationship with this thing. You resented on it when you could have, there was choices, and you made the wrong choice at every step of the way.
Right.
That's what happens in life when they're referring to God in that sense, in that story. Like, one of the things he says as a clinical psychiatrist, he's never met a single person who's gotten away with anything, whether it be moral or criminal. You don't get away with anything in this world.
Right.
The little tiny bad decisions that you make every day are going to eventually catch up with you.
Yeah, that ties into the karma, and that also ties into the Jungian idea of the shadow.
Well, yeah, it's like what something I heard that Jung had said. Carl Jung said that the human shadow has roots that reach all the way to hell.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, whoa, man! It just gave me goosebumps when I heard that, because it's so true.
Right.
That we're capable of that malevolence, and that's exactly what Cain did. And so, like, yeah, you can say, I don't believe in Cain and Abel. I don't think that ever happened. Like, how were there only two dudes? Well, whatever objective reasoning you want to use to attack that, you can say, like, okay, yeah, the story isn't real, but the archetype is hyper real.
Yeah.
And I think of it like, say you see a sitcom, and in every way, shape, and form, they're doing their absolute best to reenact an exchange at a gas station.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, like, well, was that real? No, it was actors on a set. But it's not like it isn't true. Like, that's exactly how it is.
Right.
It's meta true. This concept of meta true is what I'm struggling with.
Well, yeah.
I'm not struggling with the understanding of it. I shouldn't put it like that. I'm struggling with how it's going to be received.
And
because it's as equally complex as it must have been for the chimps to originally abstract a concept out of an individual's behavior. It seems equally difficult for people to wrap their minds around the concept of an archetype in today's society. Maybe I'm not talking to the best people.
And okay, it's like this. So stories in the Bible are more than likely just stories with historical significance to the character of human beings. The human character is built of these archetypes. And so, it's not true in the sense that this exact set of events occurred this way, but these exact set of events occur in many different ways throughout the existence of all things.
And that is, in a way, that is, because it's not the same as objective truth. It's not.
No, but it is objectively true in its own sort of subjective way.
Yeah, the way he said it was hyper true.
Yeah.
Or meta true, which I like better, because it's the truth within that which might not be true. It's an inside truth.
And that's one of my the way I interpret Passio's definition of reality is a bit materialistic, like a little bit materialistic, in so much that it is what happened. But it's also true that I feel certain ways. And did that happen? Is that a measurable, objective, material thing? No, but I felt those things, and that is true. I did feel that. So objective truth contains more than just the material reality of things. It contains the interpretive reality of things, like songs. It's true when people hear a song in a minor key, they feel sad. Now, that's all subjective though, but it's like, it's so ubiquitous that there's this, like you said, a hyper realness to it all, a hyper objectiveness to it. Like, we all know what sad music sounds like. And when we hear it, we know that it's sad. And,
even though there might not be anything objectively sad about it.
Well, it's not like it's crying. It's not it's just sounds. It's just symbolic.
The lyrics could even be positive.
Yeah, they could be, and it could still be like, that's pretty sad, homie. You know? And it's just all how you frame it. And so it's like, and this is where subjective reality and objective reality kind of cross, because it's, okay, so let's say you and I have a fight, and my subjective reality of it is that you hate me. And your subjective reality is that, like, I hate you. Now, neither one of those things are true, but it is objectively true that we both felt that way. The subjective reality and the objective reality are sort of in a feedback loop with one another, because the objective reality of things that are happening and things that are occurring inside of people is still affected by the subjective nature of everything. And it's not until you can pull out of your subjective way of seeing things, and I'm not even sure it's very possible, but if you can, that's when you're going to be able to see the objective nature of what's happening around you. So you'll be able, the idea would be, while we're having that fight, I do not project onto you my subjective reality. I quiet my subjective reality and just observe you and what your reality is. And it's objectively true that right now that's your reality. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're in this constant flux with one another. The objective reality only changes in so much as how we affect it, because we affect objective reality because we are a part of it. We are objectively there within that thing. The objective reality is kind of the canvas that we're working on. And the canvas just has like a lot of natural laws and things in place that kind of guide how things are going to go.
Yeah, there's constraints on the system.
Yeah, there's some sort of constraints on the system for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely boundaries we operate within, and I think without them we couldn't function. It's like you have to have down to have up.
Yeah.
Like you need to have. There's certain things that just have to exist, and that's the same way I look at these archetypes. It's like, yeah, you can say that you don't believe them, and you can even not act them out. And we've seen that in society many, many, many times, and we've seen the kind of horrors that it leads to, like the malevolence that it can lead to when you decide to just abandon the values in those archetypes. Because there's a value to the structure of it. Otherwise, why would we do that? Like, why would we evolve that way?
Yeah.
It's so deep. It's so deep seated within us, these systems.
Yeah.
These archetypes. I mean, I heard in another one of his lectures that lobsters have the same serotogenic systems that we do.
Right.
They have the exact same circuitry.
And he was saying that the lobsters with the most serotonin tend to be at the top of the hierarchy because they act the most boldly, they act the most confidently, they're the most happy.
No, so it's the causation is the other way around. Those that rise to the top of the hierarchy by embodying that principle, by being, the top lobster in the hierarchy, that's what kicks in the larger serotonin dose.
Yeah.
And that's what makes them stretch out. So it's the concept of like, once they've, been bold enough to get big and win a fight, it emboldens them even more.
Yeah.
And it's the concept of like those who get successful have more options to get even more successful.
It's a self-feeding system.
Exactly. And the lobster that loses, he shrinks down, he goes to hide, and that's chances he's screwed.
So it's like his behavior affected his chemistry, which affected his behavior, which affected his chemistry. It's kind of that same feedback loop we were talking about earlier.
And it's the exact same system in us, and that divergence, us from lobsters, happens something like hundreds of millions of years ago, before trees existed.
Yeah, there are some really basic fundamental structures and systems that take place within life. These bioorganic systems.
Yeah, these natural laws that are true no matter where you go.
Right.
And I like that he touches on a lot of them in his lectures, but there's a lot that he doesn't touch on. I totally abandoned my structure now. I wanted to talk about the 7 deadly sins and the whole deceit thing. But I can work back to there. Here we go.
But well, with Cain and Abel, envy was the sin there. One of the 7 deadly sins. It was Cain's envy. And his pride.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of them. Pride. Let's talk about pride.
Yeah.
We had a conversation about that recently, and I was telling you that I was having the trouble seeing how pride is always a sin. And I've heard some compelling arguments recently, and I'm going to restate them. And the argument is that those who tend to become intellectual, people who are very smart, will inevitably end up praising the creations of their own intellect. In a way, the intellect becomes a false idol.
Okay,
you put objective truth and your intellectualism and your ability to rationalize as the most important thing above all morals, above all ideologies. And once you've done that, once you have placed yourself above the ideal, because the ideal is the hero, it's these archetypal stories that we have comprised together to make a god.
Right.
Interesting point about that. I heard an argument that suggested that all polytheistic cultures eventually evolve into monotheistic cultures. Because if you say that you have a pantheon of gods that represent your values, you can't just have a level playing field of values. Certain values have to be prioritized over others, or else you have nothing. It's chaos unless you say that these things are more important than these things. And so that's why even in polytheistic cultures, they put a god at the top, like Zeus, on top of all the Greek gods.
Right.
And that eventually just leads to defining that one god in charge of the other gods as the ideal principle, or as God.
Right.
And so with pride, when you've taken your intellect and you've elevated it above that, you said that, like, I can rationalize and think beyond these behavioral patterns that have governed mankind since before trees.
Right.
That is where you fall. That is where God will come and smash you down.
Well,
in the sense, the ideal will destroy you because you're not adhering to it anymore.
I also believe that it's just built into natural law that if you try to supersede your place in the universe, it's like when you jump too high, you're going to fall really hard. There's no avoiding it. There's gravity at work, and there's sort of a spiritual gravity at work. When you're trying to rise above your own spirit and, like, be better than God itself somehow, you're essentially jumping way too high. And there is a pull that you can't escape, and you're gonna hit the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm on complete page with the 7 deadly sins and how each of them is a guaranteed. Yeah, you can say it's an interpretation of reality to embody one of those principles, whether it be wrath or lust or sloth.
Right.
But any one of them is ensuring destruction.
Right.
That's why they're known as the 7 deadly sins. And that rolls us into the 8th deadly sin.
Right.
One that we've talked about at length before, deceit.
Yeah. Deceit's the original sin, man. I swear.
I think it is the most. I agree with you on that, and I've heard a lot of interpretations of the Bible from that Darwinian perspective that actually back that theory up. And it's because that hero principle, that hero archetype, the most distilled feature of that archetype that seems to be a human universal is truth. Speaking the truth, the word of God.
Right.
And the word is what is true, what is good.
Right.
And it's the idea that if you're speaking true all the time, you're not lying to yourself, you're not lying to anybody else, then good things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
If you're telling the truth. Like, that's the idea behind the ideology, and I think that's so true, the way it plays out in your life every day to day. So the idea that, and you can see this in a lot of ancient stories about prophets and Christ figures, martyrs, if you will.
Yeah.
Messiahs, that's what I meant to say.
Most messiahs are martyrs.
All messiahs have this ability to speak the truth that makes them so popular.
Yeah.
That's what attracts people to them. And even
it's also what repels people from them.
There's a Mesopotamian god, and he was the distillation, according to their stories. All the gods came together from all these different tribes, and they went to war, and then they elected, when they were finally threatened by a significant threat, and all the gods were powerless to stop it, they elected Marduk as king god to go out and face the dragon Tiamat.
Yeah.
And Marduk's defining features was that he had eyes all around his head, and he spoke magic words.
Yeah. He could see everything, and he spoke magic.
He paid attention, and he spoke the truth. And so this idea that truth is the highest aim, like truth is the pinnacle of the hero archetype, is to speak the truth. It definitely, if that is the highest, if that is the best that you can aim for, then clearly the opposite would be deceit.
Yeah.
It's like the original author of evil.
Yeah. And it is. You could,
in the story of Adam and Eve, it's the serpent that deceives.
Yeah.
Eve, but here's the thing: is that deception is chaos. It is. To deceive is to create more chaos.
Oh yeah,
and in a strange way, though, it's from the chaos. It's from cutting up the chaos that we make our reality. It's by confronting the chaos and encapsulating it that we can make manifest whatever we desire. The reward, if you will, from slaying the dragon. So the idea that deception was the original, sin that set us off, because you can say that, like, by partaking of that fruit, it made us self-conscious. They were naked and they were ashamed. Well, yeah, because they're self-conscious.
Yeah.
Because to have knowledge, and Jordan Peterson made a great point for this, and he's like, I never understood how eating a fruit made you aware of the knowledge of good and evil. It didn't make any sense. Like, how does self-consciousness do that? It's because as soon as you're aware that you're vulnerable, as soon as you're aware of what hurts you, you're aware of what hurts others.
Yeah.
You're now capable of malevolence.
Yeah.
And so the idea that deception was the original malevolence that gave us the ability to be malevolent is really saying something about how really evil deceit is.
So if we're sticking to the theme of the 7 deadly sins and deceit being the 8th, and in my opinion, sort of the original one, you can sort of look at deceit as sort of the generative principle for each one of those. Like the deceit that causes pride is that you are better than.
You're lying to yourself.
Yeah, you're lying to yourself. So there's the you are better than, and so now that deceit creates pride. And the deceit that creates envy is them having some takes from you.
Yeah, or they have it better than you, and it's fate's problem. It's right. You blame the ideal, you blame the structure.
Right. And then, like, the deceit behind lust is, this will make you happy, And the deceit behind
you're lying to yourself about what's the highest value in that sense.
Right.
That's an interesting one. I want to expand on that one a little bit. The deceit of lust. Lust is a destructive behavior in that the thing is that's really interesting to me is we haven't had the pill around for very long.
Right.
So that's a whole new thing to factor into our societies and how we develop. It's very new. Yeah. I have recently changed my mind regarding abortions and how I feel about that. I still don't know what to do about when it's a rape. It's bloody awful. I can't reach a moral standard on that.
Yeah, because unfortunately, we live in chaos. So
we'll get to that one. But as long as the lust thing goes, the deceit that you're telling yourself when you're guilty of lust. And is that just what it is? That it'll make you happy? Meaning? It'll give you meaning?
It'll give you something. The idea is that your avenue of lust is going to do something for you. When it's truly lust and not like desire, like healthy desire. Lust is the obsession with.
It's like addiction almost.
Yeah, lust is addiction. I mean, because really, you could apply the term lust to drugs. You could apply the term lust to gambling. You could apply it to all sorts of things. Somebody who plays World of Warcraft for fucking 60 hours a week has a lust for video games, man. They have a lust for that shit. And so I think it could be summed up as addiction. And the deceit is, this is your answer. This is what will fulfill you. And in the end, it really stops you, whatever the thing is, it stops you from actually behaving with action and will in your life in a meaningful way. And so it does the opposite for you that it's telling you that it's going to do. I mean,
yes, it's
all driven by dopamine and serotonin explosions in your brain. You desire something, you work for it, you get it little by little.
It's a lack of discipline because you're essentially a slave to your hypothalamus at that point.
Right, absolutely.
And that is your deeper. I heard about a study. Have you ever heard of the marshmallow test?
Please enlighten me. So
what researchers did is they'd bring a child into the room. I don't know how old the kid was, old enough to talk.
Yeah.
Old enough to understand, the directions for the experiment. And they would put a marshmallow on the table, and they would say, you can have this marshmallow right now. But if you wait 10 minutes, you can have 2 marshmallows. And these are young, developing children. Like, I think they were 4 and 5, 4 to 6-year-olds, I think.
Yeah.
And, some of the children, they immediately just gobble that marshmallow up because you're trying to trade them. You're expecting them to trade you a physical, manifest, potential, the marshmallow was there, they can see it. And you're expecting them to trade that for 2 theoretical marshmallows in the future.
Right.
Marshmallows that don't necessarily exist to them yet.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for their hypothalamus to decide. And so some kids immediately gobble it up, and some of them sit there and they sit on their hands, or you can see them really fighting. They're actually fighting themselves to wait out that 10 minutes because they do understand the future, and they understand that the 2 marshmallows is better.
Yeah. And
so they're really trying to wait out the time. And another experiment that goes along those same lines of your being a slave to your hypothalamic region is you can catch a monkey this way. This is how you catch a monkey. You take a glass jar that's has a hole just big enough for the monkey to slip his hand in like this.
Yeah.
Straight-handed. Just big enough for that.
Yeah.
You sprinkle a bunch of goodies, a bunch of candy around the jar. And then you also put a bunch of them inside the jar. What will happen is the monkey will eat all those little bits of sugar and be like, oh, this is really good. And he'll want the ones inside the jar.
Yeah.
And he'll stick his hand into the jar and grab. And you make sure the jar is sufficiently heavy to where he can't move around with it very well.
Right.
And he'll reach into it, grab a handful of those goodies, and he's trapped. He could get his hand out if only he could.
If he wasn't
doesn't
making
realize
that greedy fist,
he won't let go of it.
That lustful, greedy fist.
It's his hypothalamus. He can't let go.
Yeah.
He's not willing to. How did I hear it? What's the expression? Sacrifice the part for the whole, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's exactly that. It's just a slave. Try to tell your dog that he can have this piece of meat now, or if he waits 10 minutes, he can have 2. He's like, meat now.
Yeah.
Meat now.
There's really no getting to him. I mean, I'm sure there's trainers out there that can do it, but I sure as hell can't. I mean, it would just be impossible. And I would never, the weird thing about it is I would never want to beat that instinct down in my dog, even though technically it would sort of make him smarter and more intellectual like a human. He's not supposed to be. He's just supposed to be a fucking dog, man. So I just leave him alone.
Who is it on you to teach him about time and the future?
Right. He doesn't need to know about that shit.
That's heavy shit.
Yeah. It might break his little heart for all I fucking know.
It does seem to be the source of a lot of suffering in our world. Okay, so let's move on through these sins, because this is actually really interesting, the concept of them all being a source of deceit. Wrath.
They deserve this, and it will make you feel better.
Yeah, I guess that's when you've lied to yourself to the point where you think existence is so foul, you've had such a rough go of it, you're so resentful.
Yeah.
That you think that it'd be better off if none of it existed. You think it'd be better off if you just destroyed.
Yeah, and you have the right to take your wrath out on somebody because they fucking deserve it.
Yeah, because Exactly. I agree.
Yeah.
I think we're on. When you see that one in a lot of these school shooters.
Yeah, and it's a lie. That's deceit. You know?
Deceit.
The truth is, we're all just confused. And then we work with these lies to like continue being sinful. Instead of like facing the fact that we're all confused and we need to be there for each other because we're all confused. We're like, I'm going to go ahead and believe this lie so that I can continue to act like an asshole. And I mean, I do it too. So,
That's the thing is like, we don't think of it as a conscious effort, but a lot of it is.
A lot of it is a conscious effort. You really
like,
do.
You snap yourself in the face with a rubber band, and the first thing you say is, I fucking told myself that was going to happen seconds before you did it.
Yeah. You're like, why did I continue to do the thing?
It's like smoking.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
That guy,
right, so we got...
Okay, real quick. That guy, Duncan Trussell, I like to listen to. Today I was listening to an episode, and he talked about how we're all in a war with our fucking hands. It's our hands and our relationship to controlling our hands that gets us in trouble. It's our hand that won't stop shoveling that fucking food in our mouth because we can't stop it for some fucking reason, right? It's on autopilot. It's just doing it. And if you could just fucking wrestle control from it, you would stop eating those goddamn Oreos because you're not supposed to. You would stop smoking that fucking cigarette because it's no good for you. But that hand just keeps rolling it, man. Like those kids sitting on their hands so they wouldn't grab that fucking marshmallow. Like, I know if I don't smoke weed for a week, I'm going to feel great. But I'd have to sit on my hands for the whole fucking week, dude.
That's a really good point that you've made, actually. The kids, they do. They sit on their hands. Mm-hmm. They're aware that that's what they're fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And they're passing the time. God, I might have to participate in one of Jordan Peterson's Q&As and ask him if he's noticed that that's a thing.
We're in a fight with our hands, man.
With our hands, that's great.
Our hands constantly betray our minds. And our minds are really the seed of it in the first place. Our mind is really the seed of it. Like, it's still there in your mind, and that's why your hand did it. But, man, if you could just make your hand stop doing it, that'd be great. I feel like it would help a whole lot.
Well, I heard this idea recently that, a lot of people make the misconception that it goes, think about the thing, do the motor skill to engage with the thing. And a lot of times it doesn't work that way. Like, your brain categorizes things in a utilitarian way.
Yeah.
You don't see a cup. You see a thing you're going to drink out of.
Yeah.
And it immediately maps on. I heard a crazy one today, and I never knew this. If you suspend, if you uprightly suspend a paraplegic above a treadmill, their legs will move.
Really?
That's how mapped on to your spinal cord and nervous system movement is when the right visual cues are there.
Interesting.
And the reason that researchers believe we've evolved this insane level of visual acuity is because we had to evolve alongside snakes. Snakes are very subtle and very quick.
That's interesting.
They actually did a study. You've heard of the invisible gorilla experiment?
Heck no.
I know you've seen the video where there's two teams, a white team and a black team, T-shirts, and they're passing a ball, and they ask you to count the number of times that the black team passes the ball.
Yeah.
You count the number of...
I kind of know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
So you go through this video, if you haven't seen it. You go through this video, and there's two teams, team in white shirts, team in black shirts, and they each got a basketball. And it says, okay, well, count the number of times that the black team passes the ball. And so you do your job, and you're paying attention to that basketball, and you're counting, and you come to the right answer. And so you're like, yeah, I nailed it. And then the researcher asks you, did you see the invisible gorilla?
Did you see the invisible gorilla?
Like, what the hell are you talking about? Sure enough, you rewind the video, and as that ball is being passed around, in plain view, a gorilla walks into center screen. It's a man in a gorilla suit, beats his chest, and then walks off screen.
Yeah.
And like a ridiculously high percentage of people do not see the gorilla on the first time through. And it's this idea that, the way that your brain is categorizing things and focusing is functioning on those principles that I was talking about earlier. And it's, what did this have to do with the hands and fighting the hands?
The same principles apply to magic, though, real quick. I mean, you divert someone's attention. So when them telling you to count the ball is the diversionary tactic. And now they've put your mind into the mode that is what you're paying attention to. Much the same way a magician does when he says, look at this. And it's what you're not looking at where all the magic is actually happening. And so that gorilla...
Interesting thing, though. Interesting detail. I don't know if they did this in the experiment, though, but I probably somewhere else that I saw this. When you switch it up, and instead you use a snake, people see the snake.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I mean,
it's coded deeply into our brains to notice snakes.
That goes back to the monkey mind, huh?
That was way, 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 way back. There was 3 things that predated on us in our evolution: snakes, birds, cats.
Yeah. And we're
3 of the biggest figures you see in symbolism.
Yeah, snakes, owls, and cats. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. We got that Sphinx. That Sphinx is old, son.
So we did wrath. We did lust. We covered. Let's move on to avarice.
Avarice?
You probably know it as greed, but that's actually not the correct term for it. It was originally called avarice. Greed was originally actually used to only mean referring to food, surprisingly.
Really?
I looked it up. I was wondering why the 2 terms existed. And yeah, if I remember correctly, I could be getting this backwards. The greed was only used for food consumption. And so you can kind of tie that in with gluttony in a weird way. It's kind of another word for gluttony. And avarice is more possessions and material things and wealth.
Yeah.
That's avarice.
I'm going to say greed, lust, and gluttony all have really similar deceit behind them.
Well, I'll agree with you on that. We can probably sum all those up in the same way, that you're essentially electing a false idol.
And saying that this is going to make me safe, this is going to make me happy, this is going to give me the power that I need. I need this. I think
a great thing that I've been hearing from Jordan Peterson is this idea that the behavior that you adopt is a behavior that should allow you to play the game not only now, but with other people in the future, in 10 years, with society. Like you have to be able to play many iterations of the same game. If you decide or interpret that the game is going to be jumping off a cliff, you don't get to play that game very much.
No, you only get to play it that once, probably.
And so it's really important that especially children learn that when they're developing, apparently between the ages of 2 and 4 is what I've heard. Like if you don't have your kids socialized between 2 and 4, like they're going to be behind for the rest of their life. Like the data on that is just empirical. It's sad, but it's true.
Crazy, man.
They don't learn how to not only, and that's why we don't like cheaters. That's why cheaters is not, because that's right up there with the deceit.
Yeah.
Because if you cheat, we're not going to want to play with you again. And you're going to be excluded, and you're going to be resentful, and you're going to brood on that, and eventually you're going to decide, well, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, you're going to become wrathful.
Exactly.
You're either going to become wrathful or slothful. Another thing about all the 7 deadly sins is that they're very tied together. In order to be really wrathful, you have to be kind of prideful. In order to say, I'm going to take out my wrath on somebody, you have to have the pride to think you deserve to do it.
I think humans are complex enough to where when we're engaging in any detestable behavior, I think we're displaying a lot of traits in unison. It's a very colorful palette that comes forth no matter what we're doing.
Yeah.
Even when we're doing good, even the best of us are monsters.
Yeah.
Like Dave Chappelle said, even in the pursuit of something good, you're going to have a lot of imperfect allies.
Oh yeah. And
that's what we constantly do, is we try to find individuals that have the least of those, and we promote them to the top.
Right.
That's what we try to do.
In an ideal system, we try to do that. Lately, I feel like the system's purposely been turned on its head, and it's a lot of, that's a whole nother topic, though. It's the whole idea that within the system, it's the exact opposite ideals of actual ethics that are being promoted, and it's purposely such. Anything that is actually ethical, they will say that what they're doing is ethical, and they'll frame it in an ethical way, and it'll be the exact embodiment of the opposite of that. And that's the thing that happens in almost 90% of media. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is. I might be exaggerating, but most media and most news and most political statements are literally the opposite of however they're being presented.
Yeah, I've noticed that too now, coming from both sides, and I see the strangest things happening in politics. And I'm leaning away from conspiracy theories more as I start to learn more about the world around me. It's like, really, you're gonna keep a conspiracy intact for 6,000 years? Really? It's starting to seem more and more far fetched to me. Do systems stay in place that are susceptible to corruption? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Humans are monsters. We're all capable of malevolence. You're never going to get rid of that. The best we can do is all try to strive for that hero ideal.
Yeah.
So, wrapping up the 7 deadly sins, would it be fair? I haven't thought it out, so I could be premature in saying this. Could we just wrap up sloth as nihilism?
Yeah.
Obviously, that doesn't work. I think it's self-evident that nihilism is not a game that has many reiterations.
Again, sloth, even the kind of the deceit is
it's none of it matters, right? It's nothing matters. Like, why would you be compelled to get up if nothing matters?
You don't need to. You know, that's kind of the lies. You just don't need to. You don't need anything. That one's actually the hardest one for me, and it might be because it's the one that hits closest to home, as I probably embody sloth out of all the 7 deadly sins the most. I used to be a slothful, wrathful guy. I've kind of toned down the wrath, and I'm just dialing up that sloth, just dialing it up. And so, it's the one that perplexes me the most, because I'm in that quagmire, and I can't see it real well, because I don't have the outside perspective, you know?
I think the best definition for sloth in this framework that we're working with
the framework of deceit,
is, and the idea that these archetypes they're important, they're so deep. To be guilty of sloth is to never confront chaos.
Ah, there you go. That's what it is. It's not. It's to be afraid, essentially.
You're not going to go out there and slay the dragon. You're not going to be able to manifest anything. The Oedipus complex, the overprotective mother, who never lets her child into any conflict, overbearing mother.
Yeah.
Is going to create an individual who's going to embody sloth very heavily. They're not gonna challenge the world.
Yeah, there's many avenues you can come to sloth by. That's for sure.
I think it's really important. I've heard this now from a couple psychologists. The importance of rough and tumble play between children.
Yeah.
And I heard about yours and Pat's talk, and you were talking about. He was saying that is it his son?
Yeah.
How old is he?
Oh, I think about 2 years.
2 years old? So yeah, he's right.
It's maybe a year and a half. I'm not positive. I'm not a good friend.
Perfect time to start him out on that. But if, like Pat said, he's like, I can't punch him back in the face. And it's like, well, you can. You kind of can.
Well, you can put clothespins on his nipples.
You play with them, you need to rough and tumble play with them. And the women might think that we get too rough with the kids. But and I don't mean to demean a child by saying this, but it's just like a dog. A dog's a social animal.
Dogs are very social animals.
They're very social, and they know how to play. They understand how to play when they're young.
There are plenty.
And it's the same thing for kids. That's how. And if anybody who's trained a puppy and raised a puppy, knows that's how you teach your dog what is play biting and what is not okay, like what hurts.
Yeah,
that's how you teach him those concepts. And like dogs learn this in the wild too. That's why they don't kill each other when they get into dominance spats. Most of the time, they'll puff up at each other and get all big, and then one of them will be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. You're better than me. I'm actually pretty useless." And he'll roll over and present his neck, and they act it out.
Yeah, they're playing. And I want to tie this back way earlier to the very beginning of this conversation when we were talking about how this reality we live in exists within these constraints. And the act of life is to actively push against and understand those constraints, and to eventually
actively confront chaos. It's like the yin yang. You got to have 1 foot. You got to be on both sides. You got to order and chaos, like right down the line.
And those wolf puppies that fight each other in the wild and push each other right to the point where they hurt each other a little bit, all the time.
Yeah, and that's what you're supposed to do when you're trying to better yourself at a skill. Like if you're like an amazing tennis player and you're playing fucking rookies and you're just dominating them and you think you're doing something good, you get a satisfaction from that. You're not doing yourself any service. You're not getting better.
Right. You're just dominating people that are worse than you.
You need to challenge people who are better. You need to be, like you said, right at that point right at that you're wading into the waters, so to speak.
You got to be at the point where it's hurting you but not crushing you.
And they have a name for it. There's a name for that in
That's
it's called the proximal zone or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
Proximal something, I can't remember it. But it's like that's where you need to be to learn. You need to be just challenged enough to where you still understand what's going on.
But enough where you're developing your skill and it's challenging
Exactly.
you. And you're probably overdoing it just a little bit to keep up. You know,
and it's like you see in the Olympics. This is the comparison that Jordan Peterson made. You know, you watch the Olympics and like figure skating. You know, or we'll use figure skating for this analogy. And the girl comes out and she does an amazing performance, and everyone's in awe. It's awe-inspiring to see a human do those things and go that far. Like, I couldn't fucking do that. No way.
right.
And so people are in awe, and the judges put up their scores. 9.8, 9.8, 9.9. You're like, amazing. Like, how could anybody do better than that? That was brilliant.
Yeah.
And then the next girl comes out, and she's a little bit nervous because she, or guy, whatever, be politically correct. And so the next person comes out, and you can see it as they're doing their routine that they are literally a hair's breadth away from fucking it all up. They're that hair's breadth away, risking it to try to get that better score, and they do. And they literally perfected perfection itself. And it's the same thing with music.
Yeah.
It seems to be bottomless. There seems to not be a top on it.
There you can always just dig a little deeper. It's okay when you're in that proximal zone. Time and space sort of stops happening. There's a little bit of adrenaline. There's a little bit of whatever you got going on in your system, and now
that idea that you just brought up time and space stopping. That's the way I've heard that. Like it's in those like that's your signal in life to know when what you're doing has meaning.
And you're doing something like
it seems to suspend. You got to check out Jordan Peterson's his interpretations of the Bible because he goes over a lot of these ideas and it's amazingly profound. He's a very deep thinker.
No, yeah, Jordan Peterson's a brilliant guy, and I would love to have him on and wait until he said that one thing that made me want to argue with him. Because other than that, he's just going to say stuff that I totally am on board with. I'm like, yep, hell yeah, keep preaching it, brother. And then I want to wait for him to be like, a dur for dur, and then I'll be like, hey, buddy, I gotta call you out on that one, and that'll be the funnest part of the whole show, And he'll probably
that's what he wants, and I think that's good for anybody who's speculating, or not just speculating, but presenting their findings. You want people to try to put a crowbar underneath it and pry it up.
Right.
And he says himself he spends a lot of time doing that, trying to put a crowbar under his ideas to find any weak spots.
Yeah.
And bring one on, he's fully willing to admit when he's being speculative, which is mostly what I do. Like I don't read a lot of studies. I read some.
I would like to say for the record that everything I say is complete bullshit. I have done no studying whatsoever. The majority of my references are comic books and pop songs.
Well, intuition. You have intuition.
I appreciate that, but I'm going to go ahead and say from here on out, and I'll try to remind everybody, but I'm making all of this up. I'm making all of it up. You know what I mean?
So, where was I?
Time for a commercial.
Hello, my name is Sloth, and I'm here to remind you that you don't gotta do shit today. You can stay in bed. You can cry until your face comes off. And guess what? The price is free. All you gotta do is give the fuck up. Brought to you by Sloth.
Where were you?
Yeah, sloth. Yeah, we nailed the idea of sloth being a refusal to confront chaos, to be willing to attempt to slay the dragon.
That's essentially the big part of it. Is you don't.
That's how you're gonna die.
You don't think that you have to do that, and you're unwilling to take the step out of your comfort zone. It's an unwillingness to take the ever important leap of faith.
Yep.
There we go. And that's why it's deadly.
Cover all of them. Was that all of them? That the last one?
I don't know. I would actually have to go back and listen to know. I think we covered the
Wrath.
ideas. We did wrath.
Lust.
We did lust.
We didn't do gluttony. I think that's the only one we're missing now is gluttony.
We kind of summed it up with greed and lust, in so much as that it's like, I need this. This is what's going to make me feel safe. This is what's going to make me feel whole. This is my false idol. This is the thing that will bring me salvation. And even though I know it's not going to, I'm still going to eat that fucking row of Oreos. Because it gives me what I want. I'm also tied up in gluttony.
I'm just trying to expand that out into like the implications for society besides society losing an individual. Trying to expand out like the inherent. It seems so petty compared to the other ones.
Well, it's not though. It embodies the same principle flaw as greed and lust. This is someone who doesn't have self-control. And in that lack of self-control, inherently that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, they have no discipline. You're okay. I'm on there. And in the case of gluttony, that's probably going to lead to, if you're gluttonous, you're probably not going to be favored in society. You're not going to be that physically fit. If we were saying we were amongst the monkeys, you wouldn't be promoted to the top of the hierarchy by the other males.
No.
Therefore, you wouldn't be peeled off the top by a female.
If I were a monkey, my best bet would be to be the cool-ass fat dude in the back who, like, when you needed a little help, was there for you.
The more social monkeys have the more stable hierarchies. That the data on that is very clear.
Yeah. And I'm pretty
that covers all of them. That covers lust, greed, gluttony. We lumped those all three together.
More or less.
Wrath.
They're a little different. Did pride.
And then we did avarice and we said that was greed. Yeah. Forgot my own definitions.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. No one's listening anyway, so it's like,
We covered them all. We did. We covered them all, and they're all forms of deceit. Deceit is the original sin.
I mean, essentially. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, okay, so even if you want...
How it appears to me. It appears to me to be the case. I'll say it that way. Let's frame it that way. It appears to me to be the case that deceit is the pinnacle, original, foundational sin.
It's very generative. And I kind of think that while that's true, they also exist in this sort of feedback loop. Like, they've always all been there, but it's like sort of like the seed is the roots, and the roots feed the tree, and the tree feeds the roots. It's a back and forth feedback relationship. But so let's look at the archetypal story of God and Lucifer real quick. It's the deceit in Lucifer's will and in Lucifer's mind that he should be as great as God, or he should be greater than God. That's
right. He's praising the creations of his own intellect.
The insect overlords whispered into his ear. The insect overlords, they got real close to Lucifer and they were like, "Hey, buddy, you're way better than God." And then the war in heaven broke out.
Did you like that thing I sent you about Jiminy Cricket?
I actually didn't read that, and you should tell me about it now.
It's that, it was a comparison made by, again, Jordan Peterson. I'm watching a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, I know.
But, he was going through, the meta-truth in Pinocchio, if you will.
Yeah.
Because Disney movies are great. They're full of them. And it made me realize that in my big backup of stuff that I made recently, I don't have the Disney original movies, and I want them in there, because if I do have kids, I want to show them the original Disney movies. Like, they're going to be raised on those like I was. I think they're good stories. And I think they're good stories
part of the MK Ultra programming. No, I'm sorry. I totally understand why you want to do that. And I totally watched Sleeping Beauty with my kid recently. Like, we both had never seen it, and I put Sleeping Beauty on and we watched it.
Great story.
What's that?
It's a great story. The archetype that plays out in there with the overprotected daughter is brilliant.
Yeah. And
the overprotected daughter that winds up unconscious is brilliant.
And I think I heard Duncan Trussell saying this again, and I want to give him credit, even if he didn't say it, because I'm not sure. But like, there's this sort of this archetype that plays out is the Dark Mother isn't invited to the table.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And it's this kind of this feminine energy that's being excluded from the whole, because the dark feminine energy is still part of the whole, and so it curses the baby, this overprotectiveness by not bringing.
Yeah, it's a refusal of the shadow.
Yeah,
you need to acknowledge that there is chaos in the world, and you have to invite that chaos in and confront it. And you have to teach her to do that.
And that's why it's when it's a young man, it's always a male villain archetype in those classical stories, because it's the representation of the male shadow. So it's like with Sleeping Beauty.
There's both on both sides. On the male side, you have the wise king and you have the evil tyrant.
Yeah.
And on the female side, you have Mother Nature and then the devouring mother.
Yeah, and in Sleeping Beauty, obviously the three fairy godmothers were Mother Nature. They represented the positive, nurturing, feminine energy.
I think they were kind of useless as well, because they kind of did the exact same thing that her parents did by sheltering her.
Yeah, I mean...
But they weren't introducing that principle of teaching her to confront chaos.
And that's what... Yeah, that's what she needs to do on her own. She needs to go out into the woods and eat peyote and be humbled and return, with knowledge,
Someone wrote a letter to Jordan Peterson. He said this in his lecture. He mentioned a letter that he wrote, that was written to him, and he thought it worthy to bring up, where someone said that they had recently participated in a ayahuasca ceremony. And in their vision, as they were in that dream state, Jordan Peterson came to them. and get this.
Okay, go for it.
And that the spirit of Mother Nature, because that was the ayahuasca, it was the spirit of Mother Nature, like gripping her. He could tell it was a woman's hand who had written the letter. The Mother Nature that had gripped her was speaking to her as Jordan Peterson appeared in her vision, and it told her that it was happy that he was speaking up, because he is the one to bring back the principle of the heroic male at this time, or something to that effect.
He's the one seeding it.
Yeah, he's championing that principle back, and Mother Nature needs that.
And what's crazy is like, so if I want all of a sudden I want to drive that to Zelda, okay? So we got these Ganondorfs running around, and they're all like the rich pieces of shit. And then we also got the female Ganondorfs running around. See, Zelda is just as bad because they don't really get into the female darkness either. They sort of exclude it from the story, but it's and then
the same thing they do in the Trinity.
So who's going to bring the Zelda archetype back? Though, because she's the female embodiment of good or whatever, of wisdom.
Yeah, she's the wise mother, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we need all that happening. We need that for any kind of real change to occur. Essentially, the idea I'm starting to get maybe about our reality is that there really is like these forces of disorder and order, in effect, of a sort of good and evil, as it were. And they've been in a dance forever. It's their fate to be in that dance. And the essential thing is, it's like, if you don't want the Dark Age to hit you, you then have to transmute the cycle so that it can begin in the Golden Age. And if it doesn't begin in the Golden Age, it's going to begin in the fucking worst age you can. It's going to begin in the Age of Ash.